The crisp winter air always made the afternoon light inside my dining room look sharp. That Sunday, I was smoothing down the white linen napkins, folding them next to the polished porcelain plates. A few feet away, the Sunday pot roast was resting under foil, filling the downstairs with a rich aroma of rosemary and garlic. It was the scent of comfort. Then, the heavy silence of the hallway split open. My daughter-in-law, Tara, stepped into the kitchen doorway. She didn't offer a greeting or ask if I needed a hand. Instead, she stood perfectly still, pointing her expensive smartphone directly at my face. I gave her a small smile, assuming she was filming the beautiful table setting for her social media stories. But then her voice cut through the quiet, dripping with cruel amusement. "Our live-in maid," Tara said directly to the lens. "At least she's good for something." She let out a patronizing giggle and stopped recording. I froze, a silver knife gripped tightly in my hand. Tara simply gave a careless shrug and sauntered back to the living room. Minutes later, I pulled out my phone and opened the app. The video was already uploaded, broadcasted to thousands. But the final, devastating blow was the notification blinking beneath it. My own son, Derek, the child living under my roof completely rent-free, had left a comment. A single crying, laughing emoji. An ice-cold clarity washed over me. To them, I was just free labor. An automated machine that cooked and cleaned without demanding a dime. I quietly took my winter coat, slid my purse over my shoulder, and stepped out into the freezing air, locking the door behind me. I drove toward a quiet bed and breakfast. I needed space to plan. They thought my quiet departure was temporary. They had no idea that by tomorrow morning, the first financial pillar of their rent-free fantasy would be completely demolished. The next morning, the winter sun broke through the curtains of my small room at the bed and breakfast. I sat on the balcony, wrapping my hands around a steaming mug of black coffee. For the first time in a year, I wasn't downstairs scrambling to fry eggs or brew fresh dark roast for two ungrateful adults. At past 8, my phone began to vibrate violently. A text from Tara lit up the screen. "Why was my card declined? I'm standing at the register with a full cart at the grocery store. It's embarrassing. Fix it now." The card wasn't hers. It was an extra debit card linked directly to my primary checking account. A year ago, I had handed it to her strictly for shared household items, to help them save for a down payment. Over months, it had quietly become their personal fund for luxury groceries. Without hesitation, I opened my banking app and permanently blocked the joint card. I didn't reply or offer emotional explanations. By noon, I drove back to the house. The moment my key turned in the front door, Tara's sharp footsteps echoed down the hallway. She was standing in the entryway, her arms crossed and her face flushed with irritation. "What the hell was that this morning?" she snapped. "I looked like an absolute idiot at the register. Did you forget to transfer the money?" I calmly hung up my coat, refusing to match her frantic energy. I looked her dead in the eye. "No," I said, my voice completely flat. "I didn't forget anything. I canceled the card permanently." Tara gasped, her jaw dropping. Before she could unleash another wave of anger, the living room door opened, and Derek stepped out, completely unaware of the financial storm heading his way. Derek rubbed the back of his neck, sighing deeply before he even reached the entryway. "Mom, come on, you can't just do that," he said, his voice laced with annoyance. "How are we supposed to shop now? You completely cut us off." I turned my head slowly to face my son. "With your own money, Derek," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "That card was a courtesy. It was never meant to fund your everyday lifestyle while you live here rent-free. I am not carrying your financial burden anymore." I extended my arm, palm up. I'd like the physical card back now. Tara huffed, dug through her designer purse, and tossed the plastic card carelessly onto the entry table. All this drama over one stupid video, she muttered. It was literally just a joke. You're taking it way too personally. It was your idea of a joke, I said, slipping the card into my pocket. And this is my bank account. You don't need my money. I walked straight past them into the kitchen. Instead of preparing a massive family lunch, I heated up a single can of tomato soup for myself. I sat at the table, eating quietly while staring out the window. Derek hovered nervously in the doorway, clearly waiting for me to ask if he wanted some, the way I always did. I kept eating in complete silence. That afternoon, I walked into the upstairs hallway and looked at their overflowing laundry basket. I didn't lift it. I didn't touch a single piece of clothing. I simply walked right past it, leaving it exactly where it was. Tomorrow was Wednesday, the day I traditionally handled the entire household's chores. And tomorrow, they were going to find out exactly what happens when the live-in maid goes on a complete strike. 2 days passed in an oddly peaceful quiet. I strictly cooked only for myself, loaded only my own small dishes into the dishwasher, and wiped down only the specific kitchen surfaces that I had personally used. On Wednesday morning, the quiet broke. Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a deeply wrinkled blue dress shirt. "Mom, you haven't done the laundry yet," he said, sounding completely lost. "I desperately need this specific shirt for an important business meeting this afternoon." I slowly glanced up from the morning newspaper and took a calm sip of my tea. "Your laundry basket is still sitting right where you left it in the upstairs hall, Derek," I said, my voice untroubled. "The washing machine in the basement is completely free. You know exactly how it works." He blinked in confusion. "But you always do the laundry on Wednesdays. Tara doesn't have the time today. She's got her workout class." "I am happily retired, Derek," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "But let me make one thing clear. I am not the hired help. If Tara has time for the gym, she has time to run a washing machine. Or you can do it yourself." He let out a frustrated sigh and stomped down the basement stairs. Later, I gathered up Tara's fancy magazines scattered on my coffee table and Derek's muddy sneakers blocking the entryway. They had been treating my downstairs like their personal living room. I placed everything into a large plastic basket and set it right outside their bedroom door upstairs. Then, I dragged my old wingback chair out of the guest room and placed it in the best spot in the living room. Just as I sat down, I heard the sharp click of the front door. Tara stopped dead in the living room doorway and stared at me, settled deeply into my old wingback chair. "What is that old chair doing here?" she asked sharply. "It doesn't even match the couch. We wanted the living room to look modern for when our friends come over." "We?" I said calmly, turning the page of my book slowly. "Let me remind you, Tara, this is my house. I like this chair by the window. And by the way, I put your miscellaneous things in a basket outside your bedroom door. From now on, please keep all of your personal items inside your own rooms." She opened her mouth to argue, realized I wasn't backing down, and stomped upstairs. A minute later, the muffled sound of her voice echoed through the ceiling, shrill and angry on the phone. That evening, Derek walked into the kitchen while I was slicing fresh bread for my sandwich. He looked incredibly nervous. "Mom, Tara is really upset upstairs," he whispered pleadingly. "Can't you just cut her some slack? We all live here together. It's supposed to be a family home." "Exactly, Derek. We live here together," I replied evenly. "But let's be accurate. You two are my guests who do not pay a single dollar in rent. I have been cutting you slack for a whole year. Now, I am cutting some slack for myself." He looked down uncomfortably. Look, we were going to talk to you about our summer vacation plans. You always help us out with the travel fund. We found a great beach house. Not this year, I said firmly, picking up my plate. I am keeping my money for myself. I have renovations planned. Derek's eyes widened in sheer shock. The next morning, I woke up early with a specific plan. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. The local handyman had arrived, holding a toolbox filled with heavy-duty deadbolts. The handyman showed up at 8 o'clock sharp. Derek and Tara were still fast asleep upstairs as he quietly walked through the downstairs hallway. My request for him that morning was simple, yet far more powerful than redoing a kitchen. I had heavy-duty new locks put on my master bedroom door and my home office door. Lately, Tara had gotten into the annoying habit of walking into my personal rooms like they were her own, borrowing my expensive hand cream or dropping off random boxes. My personal privacy had completely disappeared over the last year. When the handyman finished drilling into the solid wood, he handed me 2 shiny sets of keys. I immediately locked my office door from the outside, slipping the key deep into my cardigan pocket. Around 10 o'clock, Tara shuffled into the kitchen, still half asleep, and poured herself a mug of coffee. As she walked back down the hallway, I heard her casually try the handle on my office door. She rattled it once, paused in confusion, and then rattled it significantly harder. "Is this door stuck or something?" she called out loudly, her voice filled with instant annoyance. I leaned against the kitchen doorway, looking completely relaxed. "No, it's not stuck, Tara. It's locked." She spun around on her heels, staring at me with wide eyes. "Locked? Why on earth would you lock it?" "Because it is my private space," I said calmly. "I don't want you two going into my personal rooms without permission anymore." She snorted loudly, rolling her eyes. "That is absolutely ridiculous. We're a family. What could you possibly be hiding in there?" "My peace and quiet," I said shortly, turning my back to her. Tara stomped back upstairs, her heavy footsteps vibrating through the ceiling. But the next boundary involved my spacious garage, which was currently packed with their dusty moving boxes. That afternoon, I opened the massive garage door, allowing the cold winter light to spill across a literal wall of brown moving boxes, old disassembled furniture, and tangled sports gear. When they had first moved into my house a year ago, they had promised me they would sort through all of it within a couple of weeks. That day never came. Instead, my own car had been sitting out on the freezing street for months. I wheeled a small wooden cart out from the garden shed and started moving their things out, box by box. I carried everything to the backyard and stacked it all neatly under the big covered carport. It was perfectly protected from the harsh winter weather, but it was no longer taking up my valuable indoor space. After 3 long hours of hard physical work, I thoroughly swept the concrete garage floor. Then I grabbed my keys, started my car, and parked it right in the middle of the empty space. The soft click of the automatic garage door closing behind my car sounded like absolute music to my ears. When Derek finally got home from a long day at work and saw the massive towers of boxes stacked in the backyard, he stormed straight into the living room. "Mom, why is all of our stuff sitting outside in the carport?" he demanded loudly. "It can't stay out there. Someone could steal it, or the damp air could ruin it." I stayed completely relaxed, sorting through some old family photos in my lap. "You're entirely right, Derek," I said, without raising my voice. "It can't stay there. That means you'll need to move it all up to the attic or hire a truck to get rid of it this weekend. I need my garage back." Derek stared down at me like he didn't even recognize his own mother. But as Sunday morning rolled around, they decided to strike back with a petty surprise waiting for me right in the kitchen. Sunday mornings were traditionally meant for quiet breakfasts, but when I walked into the kitchen at 8 o'clock sharp, I noticed right away that the double-door refrigerator looked strangely empty. I pulled the heavy handle open, and my jaw tightened. My favorite artisanal cheese was completely gone, along with my organic Greek yogurt and fresh bakery rolls. In their exact place sat a crumpled little note written in Tara's messy handwriting. "We decided it's best to keep our food strictly separate since you want everything else in this house separate now," the note read. "We took some of your stuff because we hadn't had time to do our own grocery shopping yet." I didn't let out a sigh. It was such a petty, obvious attempt to provoke an emotional reaction. Instead, I quietly went out for a long, peaceful 2-hour walk around the local park. When I came back, they had completely taken over the kitchen, cooking a massive breakfast and hogging every clean countertop. They purposefully ignored my entry. I didn't say a word. Instead, I calmly walked into my home office, opened my laptop, and ordered a small, energy-efficient mini-fridge online. The appliance arrived the very next afternoon. I had the delivery guys carry it straight into my locked office. That afternoon, I drove out to a high-end gourmet market, bought premium food, and locked it safely inside my private room. That evening, Derek and Tara marched into the kitchen and opened the big refrigerator. It was completely empty, except for a few sad jars of condiments. Derek called out loudly, "Mom, there's literally nothing to eat in here." I walked to the doorway. "You wanted things separate, remember? I shopped for myself today. My food stays locked in my private room from now on." Tara walked up to me, her face hardening into pure disbelief. But before she could start an argument, Friday night arrived, and with it, a massive family ambush. It was Friday night, around 7 o'clock. I was sitting comfortably in my wingback chair, enjoying a cold glass of white wine, when the sudden sound of car doors slamming outside interrupted the quiet evening. I looked out into the driveway, and my eyebrows shot up in surprise. Tara's parents were walking up my pavement, pulling 2 small rolling suitcases behind them. Tara instantly rushed to the front entryway, throwing the door wide open with a massive, triumphant smile on her face. Derek stood right beside her, though he was shifting his weight, looking deeply uneasy. Nobody had bothered to give me a single word of warning about this weekend visit. Tara led her parents straight into the downstairs area, her voice echoing loudly. "Come on right in, guys. Make yourselves completely comfortable. The guest room is right down this hall," she said cheerfully, casting a quick, defiant glance in my direction. I stayed completely seated in my chair. Tara marched confidently up to the guest room door, grabbed the polished brass handle, and turned it. Nothing happened. It was completely unyielding. Locked. She spun around on her heels toward me, her fake smile completely vanishing. "Did ye lock this door?" she demanded sharply. I calmly set my wine glass down and walked over to greet her parents politely. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," I said with a warm smile. "It's very nice to see you both." Tara took a heavy step closer to me, lowering her voice into an angry hiss. "Open this door right now. Where else are they supposed to sleep?" "You really should have asked me ahead of time, Tara," I replied evenly. "The guest room is no longer available. I converted it into my new private craft room. You have that large living area upstairs with a pull-out couch. I'm sure they will sleep just fine up there." Derek's face turned bright red, and Tara's parents stared awkwardly at the floor in total silence. Derek quietly picked up the suitcases, but the real storm was going to hit the moment they went upstairs. The weekend was surprisingly quiet. Tara's parents mostly stayed upstairs in the cramped quarters or went out on long day trips around the city. On Sunday afternoon, they said a rather cool, stiff goodbye to me and finally drove away. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, Derek came out to the backyard garden where I was quietly deadheading my hydrangeas. He looked exhausted. "Mom, what happened on Friday night was incredibly awkward," he said, his voice laced with resentment. "Tara's been upstairs crying for hours. You could have at least given us a warning." I set down my heavy garden shears and looked my son straight in the eyes. "Funny thing about warnings, Derek," I said, my voice ice cold. "You two have been living here for an entire year, like this is a luxury hotel and I am the unpaid staff. That era is officially over." I pulled a crisp, folded white envelope from the pocket of my cardigan and handed it directly to him. He took it hesitantly, frowning. "What's this?" "A standard, legally binding rental agreement for the upstairs space," I said calmly. "It's just the fair market rate for the square footage you occupy, plus your exact share of the monthly utilities. It starts on the 1st of next month." Derek stared down at the white envelope like it was absolute poison. "Rent?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "But Mom, we're actively trying to save up for a house. If we have to pay you rent, it's going to take us years longer to leave." "Then you will just have to adjust your financial plans like every other grown adult," I answered kindly. "Read it over carefully. If you both sign it, I will be glad to have you as my tenants. If not, you have exactly 3 months to find your own place and move out." He gave a tiny, defeated nod and walked slowly back inside. I knew the conversation between him and Tara upstairs was going to be incredibly loud, but I had no idea just how desperate they would get before the 1st of the month arrived. The next few days, the entire house was filled with a thick, heavy, and incredibly tense silence. There were no more dramatic blow-ups, no loud arguments, and no nasty, passive-aggressive looks exchanged in the hallways. Derek and Tara moved through the corridors soundlessly, acting as if they were ghosts in my living space. I spent my newfound free time exactly how I wanted to, reading my favorite books by the window and peacefully setting up my new craft room. I finally felt like the queen of my own castle again. On Thursday evening, as I was tracking some expenses on my computer, there was a soft, hesitant knock on my office door. I stood up, walked over, and turned the shiny new key to open it. Derek was standing right there in the dim light of the hallway, holding the white envelope in his hand. He extended his arm and handed it back to me quietly. "We signed it," he said, his voice dropping to a low, completely subdued whisper. I looked at him closely. The childish entitlement was completely gone from his face. "We get it now, Mom," he added, looking down at his shoes. "We really do. We'll make sure to pay the rent completely on time. And I'm truly sorry. About the video Tara posted, about my comment, about all of it. We shouldn't have treated you that way." I took the envelope from his hand. I didn't break down into emotional tears, but I gave him a very kind, genuine nod of appreciation. "Thank you, Derek. That is a very good start. We're already actively looking for our own apartment completely on the other side of town," he added quickly. "Tara thinks it will be much better for everyone if we have our own separate household completely. Tara never treated me like her personal staff ever again. They paid their very first month's rent exactly on time. But as the 4th month rolled around, the day finally arrived for them to hand over the keys for good." 4 months flew by in a routine of quiet predictability. True to their word, Derek and Tara spent their weekends handling their own chores, buying their own groceries, and organizing their transition. The boundary had been drawn in stone. Then, moving day finally arrived. A small moving truck backed into the driveway, and over the course of a Saturday morning, the towers of boxes I had stacked under the carport were loaded away. They hadn't managed to get that luxurious beach house. Instead, they had signed a lease on a modest, practical apartment on the completely opposite side of town. As the sun began to set, Derek walked into the living room one last time. He reached into his pocket and placed the heavy brass keys to the upstairs bedrooms onto the entry table. "Everything is cleared out, Mom," he said softly, giving me a small, genuine smile. "Thank you for everything." I smiled back, stepping forward to give him a gentle, warm hug. I love you, Derek. I truly wish you both the absolute best. The front door clicked shut, and the sound of the moving truck faded into the distance. Silence. Pure, beautiful, and unburdened silence instantly filled every single square inch of the property. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. I carefully prepared my breakfast, carried it over to my old, comfortable wingback chair by the big living room window, and sat down. The bright morning sunlight poured completely across the polished hardwood floors. There were no dirty sneakers blocking the entryway. There was absolutely no one upstairs expecting me to slave away over a hot stove. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my hot coffee, leaned my head back, and felt a deep lightness fill my body. I wasn't the live-in maid. I was just me, sitting peacefully in my own home. Respect isn't something you ever have to beg for in your own home. It is the lock on the door.